Hello, and welcome to Miss Hope's Reading Hour on another fabulous FRI-YAY. Hello to everyone. Hello to Facebook and Instagram and YouTube. So glad to be here with you on this Friday. So, how was your Thursday? Hopefully, you had a great Thursday. My name is Miss Hope. If you are a first timer here at Miss Hope's Reading Hour, I am Miss Hope. So glad to see you all. Ooh, sweating a little bit. So, today is a little more humid than it was the rest of this week. Okay. So, it's a little hot in here with lights and things. You know what I'm saying? So, that's why. Ooh, yeah, a little fan action would be good. Yes. Now, I would have my fan on, but as you know, Miss Hope's fan is kind of loud, so I can't have it on necessarily. Wait a minute. Let me adjust my screen. Oh, there you go. Okay. So, yes, it's a little hot, but it's a good day. It's a great day. Okay. So, how was your Thursday? Hopefully, it was great. Hopefully, you had a good Thursday. My Thursday was pretty good. It was okay. Didn't do anything necessarily special, but hey, any day that you can rest and relax, trying to get ready for the school year, as a matter of fact, talking to the teacher that I work with and trying to make sure that we have everything together for the students once we go back to school virtually. So that was part of my Thursday. Um, so for this Friday, I was working a lot this morning. Why was I working a lot this morning? Well, um, so this is a secret. Don't tell anybody. Okay. So, my mom, her birthday is on Monday, but we are planning a little surprise for her on Saturday. So, kind of trying to keep it on the hush hush, okay? So that we can plan everything and she can be greatly surprised, okay? So, that is what my FRI-YAY has started out with today. So trying to move around and not seem, you know, um, like anything's going on. That's basically what I've been trying to do. Okay. So, well, we've all been trying to do. Okay. So that's the start of my Friday. Hopefully, yours has been pretty good too. Hopefully, you find a lot of ways to enjoy yourselves before school starts or in the midst of school starting, because I know some of you have already started school. Okay. Now, let us get into the books we have for today. Now, you saw the teaser book, and I thought that, up until school officially starts here in Philadelphia, that I would read some books that might talk about like what kinds of things you might deal with in the beginning of school or when you're in school and with friends and things like that. So today I wanted to think about how do you handle it when you like something and you know that your friends don't like it too? How do you handle that? And how hard or easy is it for you to invite new friends into your already established friendships? That can be kind of hard. I've seen that, kind of go south a little bit sometimes where someone new tries to come in and then they're just like, no, no new friends. But new friends might be a good thing. So, our first book is called Chester's Way. It's called Chester's Way. As you can see, the cute little mousy there. Now, cartoon mice, I don't mind. Real ones, I do. Remember when we read the stories about mice? Real ones kind of skeeve me out, but little cartoon ones can be kind of cute. Chester's Way by Kevin Henkes. That's going to be our first book today. All right. And our second book for today will be A Bad Case of Stripes. I was wondering like where I was going to read this book because sometimes I like to have a theme. I like to put the books together and read them together. So I was like, where am I going to put A Bad Case of Stripes? And this seemed like a really good place to put this book. So this book is by David Shannon, A Bad Case of Stripes. And last but not least, friends, last but not least, more into the mystery of Belly Up by Stuart Gibbs. Still trying to find out exactly what happened to poor Henry the Hippo here, okay? And guess what I found? In a place where they were looking me smack in the face. We talked about these on Wednesday. We talked about these. I could not find my glasses. And I said, I bet you that when I look for them after the reading hour is over, they're going to be staring me right in the face. And I asked, did anyone see my glasses? And they were like, you mean those right over there? And I looked, and there they were, staring me smack in the face. The trouble with glasses. I'm going to look up some books about wearing glasses. Because sometimes it can be something to deal with, keeping up with these things here. Okay? We're going to find some books on wearing glasses. All right. So our first book is Chester's Way by Kevin Henkes. All right. Chester had his own way of doing things. Hello, my name is Chester. I like croquet and peanut butter and making my bed. He always cut his sandwiches diagonally. He always got out of bed on the same side. And he never left the house without double knotting his shoes. Oh, sir and ma'ams, I forgot something. There you go. Oops, we're a little wobbly. Chester always had the same thing for breakfast: toast with jam and peanut butter, which is good breakfast. And he always carried a miniature first aid kit in his back pocket just in case. You definitely have a mind of your own, said Chester's mother. That's one way to put it, said Chester's father. All the different ways he had of doing things. Chester's best friend Wilson was exactly the same way. That's why they were best friends. Chester wouldn't play baseball unless Wilson played, and they never swung at the first pitch or slid head first. Wilson wouldn't ride his bike unless Chester wanted to, and they always used hand signals. If Chester was hungry, Wilson was too, but they rarely ate between meals. Some days I can't tell those two apart, said Wilson's mother. Me either, said Wilson's father. Chester and Wilson, Wilson and Chester. That's the way it was. They loved to go on picnics. Once, when Wilson accidentally swallowed a watermelon seed and cried because he was afraid that a watermelon plant would grow inside him, Chester swallowed one too. "Don't worry," said Chester. "Now, if you grow a watermelon plant, I'll grow one too." Chester duplicated his Christmas list every year and gave a copy to Wilson because they always wanted the same things anyway. For Halloween, they always dressed as things that went together: salt and pepper shakers, two mittens on a string, ham and eggs. "They really are two peas in a pod," said Chester's mother. "Looks like it," said Chester's father. In spring, Chester and Wilson shared the same umbrella. In winter, they never threw snowballs at each other. In the fall, they raked leaves together. In summer, they reminded each other to wear sunscreen so they wouldn't burn. What conscientious friends. Chester and Wilson, Wilson and Chester. That's the way it was. And then Lily moved into the neighborhood. Lily had her own way of doing things. "I'm Lily. I'm the queen. I like everything." She wore band-aids all over her arms and legs to look brave. She talked backwards to herself sometimes, so no one would know what she was saying. And she never left the house without one of her nifty disguises. Lily waved at all the cars that passed by, even if she didn't know who was in them. And she always carried a loaded squirt gun in her back pocket, just in case. "She definitely has a mind of her own," said Chester. "That's one way to put it," said Wilson. Oh, I kind of like her. When Lily asked Chester and Wilson to play, they said they were busy. When she called them up on the phone, they disguised their voices and said they weren't home. If Lily was walking on one side of the street, Chester and Wilson crossed to the other and hid. "She's something else," said Chester. "Looks like it," said Wilson. One day, Chester and Wilson were practicing their hand signals. While Chester and Wilson were practicing their hand signals, some older boys rode by, popping wheelies. They circled Chester and Wilson and yelled personal remarks. Chester and Wilson didn't know what to do. Just when they were about to give up hope, a fierce-looking cat with horrible fangs jumped out of the bushes and frightened the older boys away. "And are you who I think you are?" Chester asked the cat. "Of course," the cat replied. "Thank you, Lily," said Chester. "You're welcome, Chester," said Lily. "Thank you, Lily," said Wilson. "You're welcome, Wilson," said Lily. "I'm glad you were wearing a disguise," said Chester. "And I'm glad you had your squirt gun," said Wilson. "I always do," said Lily, "just in case." Afterward, Chester invited Lily over for lunch. You have a Muscle Mouse cup? Said Lily. Of course, said Chester. I do too, said Lily. Same here, said Wilson. Chester and Wilson cut their sandwiches diagonally. Lily asked Chester's mother if she had cookie cutters, and she made stars and flowers and bells. That's neat, said Chester. Wow, said Wilson. That night, Lily invited Chester and Wilson to a sleepover. You have a nightlight, said Chester. Of course I do, said Lily. I do too, said Chester. Same here, said Wilson. Chester and Wilson wanted toast and jam and peanut butter for breakfast the next morning. Boring, said Lily. Try this instead. This is good, said Chester. Wow, said Wilson. After that, when Lily asked Chester and Wilson to play, they said yes. When she called them up on the phone, they had pleasant conversations. And if Lily was walking on one side of the street, Chester and Wilson waved and ran to catch up with her. Chester and Wilson taught Lily hand signals, and she taught them how to pop wheelies. Lily taught Chester and Wilson how to talk backwards, and they taught her how to double knot her shoes. Some days I can't tell those three apart, said Lily's mother. Me either, said Lily's father. Chester and Wilson and Lily. Lily and Wilson and Chester. That's the way it was. For Halloween, they dressed as the three blind mice. For Christmas, Lily gave Chester and Wilson nifty disguises, and they gave her a box of multicolored shoelaces, extra long for double knotting. They loved to go on picnics. When Chester and Wilson told Lily about how they had swallowed a watermelon seed once, Lily swallowed 3 of them. I'll grow a watermelon plant for each of us, she said. In spring, Chester, Wilson, and Lily shared the same umbrella. In winter, they never threw snowballs at each other. In fall, they raked leaves together. In summer, they reminded each other to wear sunburns so they wouldn't burn. Chester and Wilson and Lily. Lily and Wilson and Chester. That's the way it was. And then Victor moved into the neighborhood. The end. So, since the new school year is starting, don't be so quick to not let new friends in, because you never know. They can teach you some new things. You can teach them some new things, and you can help keep each other safe. That happens. Very good story. I like that story. I actually have another book by Mr. Kevin Hankes that I can't wait to read to you guys. All right, our next book, A Bad Case of Stripes. That would freak me out. Okay, let's find out how this bad case of stripes happened, shall we? All right. Camilla Cream loved lima beans, but she never ate them. All of her friends hated lima beans, and she wanted to fit in. Camilla was always worried about what other people thought of her. Today she was fretting even more than usual. It was the first day of school, and she couldn't decide what to wear. There were so many people to impress. She tried on 42 outfits, but none seemed quite right. She put on a pretty red dress and looked in the mirror and then screamed. Why did she scream? Let's find out why. Her mother ran into the room and she screamed too. Oh my heavens, she cried. You're completely covered with stripes. This was certainly true. Camilla was striped from head to toe. She looked like a rainbow. I feel fine, Camilla answered, but just look at me. You get back in bed this instant, her mother ordered. You're not going to school today. Camilla was relieved. She didn't want to miss the first day of school, but she was afraid of what the other kids would say, and she had no idea what to wear with those crazy stripes. Whoa. Can you imagine? That afternoon, Dr. Bumble came to examine Camilla. Most extraordinary, he exclaimed. I've never seen anything like it. Are you having any coughing, sneezing, runny nose, aches, pains, chills, hot flashes, dizziness, drowsiness, shortness of breath, or uncontrollable twitching? No, Camilla told him. I feel fine. Well then, Dr. Bumble said, turning to Mrs. Cream, I don't see any reason why she shouldn't go to school tomorrow. Here's some ointment that should help clear up those stripes in a few days. If it doesn't, you know where to reach me. And off he went. Whew. So she can still go to school? The next day was a disaster. Everyone at school laughed at Camilla. They called her Camilla Crayon and Night of the Living Lollipop. She tried her best to act as if everything was normal, but when the class said the Pledge of Allegiance, her stripes turned red, white, and blue, and she broke out in stars. Oh man, bad to worse. Okay. The other kids thought this was great. One yelled out, let's see some purple polka dots. Sure enough, Camilla turned all purple polka dotty. Someone else shouted checkerboard, and the pattern of squares covered her skin. Soon, everyone was calling out different shapes and colors, and poor Camilla was changing faster than you can change channels on a TV. Oh, man. That night, Mr. Harms, the school principal, called. I'm sorry, Mrs. Cream, he said. I'm going to have to ask you to keep Camilla home from school. She's just too much of a distraction. And I've been getting calls from other parents. They're afraid those stripes may be contagious. Camilla was embarrassed. She couldn't believe that 2 days ago, everyone liked her. Nobody wanted to be in the same room with her. Her father tried to make her feel better. Is there anything I can get you, sweetheart? He asked. No, thank you, sighed Camilla. What she really wanted was a nice plate of lima beans. But she had been laughed at enough for one day. Oh, man. Well, yes, I see, Dr. Bumble mumbled when Mrs. Cream phoned the next day. I think I'd better bring in the specialist. We'll be right over. About an hour later, Dr. Bumble arrived with 4 people in long white coats. He introduced them to the Creams. This is Dr. Grop, Dr. Sponge, Dr. Cricket, and Dr. Young. Then the specialist went to work on Camilla. They squeezed and jabbed and tapped and tested. It was very uncomfortable. Well, it's not the mumps, concluded Dr. Grop. Not the measles, said Dr. Sponge. Definitely not the chicken pox, put in Dr. Cricket. or sunburn, said Dr. Young. Try these, said the specialist. They each handed her a bottle filled with different colored pills. Take one of each before bed, said Dr. Grop. Then they filed out the front door, followed by Dr. Bumble. Let's see if this works. That night, Camilla took her medicine. It was awful. When she woke up the next morning, she did feel different. But when she got dressed, her clothes didn't fit right. She looked in the mirror, and there, staring back at her, was a giant multicolored pill with her face on it. Oh, man. This has gotten bad. Dr. Bumble rushed over as soon as Mrs. Cream called, but this time, instead of specialists, he brought the experts. Dr. Gord and Dr. Mellon were the finest scientific minds in the land. Once again, Camilla was poked and prodded, looked at and listened to. The experts wrote down lots of numbers. Then they huddled together and whispered. Dr. Gord finally spoke. It might be a virus, he announced with authority. Suddenly, fuzzy little virus balls appeared over Camilla. Or possibly a form of bacteria, said Dr. Mellon. Out popped squiggly little bacteria tails. Or it could be a fungus, added Dr. Gord. Instantly, Camilla was covered with different colored fungus blotches. The experts looked at Camilla, then at each other. We need to go over these numbers again back at the lab, Dr. Gord explained. We'll call you when we know something. But the experts didn't have a clue, much less a cure. Whew. I can only imagine. By now, the TV news had found out about Camilla. Reporters from every channel were outside her house telling the story of the bizarre case of the incredible changing kid. Soon, a huge crowd was camped out on the front lawn. Oh, man. Whew. The Creams were swamped with all kinds of remedies from psychologists, allergists, herbalists, nutritionists, psychics, an old medicine man, a guru, and even a veterinarian. Each so-called cure only added to poor Camilla's strange appearance until it was hard to even recognize her. She sprouted roots and berries and crystals and feathers and a long furry tail, but nothing worked. Oh, man. One day, a woman called who called herself an environmental therapist. She claimed she could cure Camilla. Close your eyes, she said. Breathe deeply and become one with your room. I wish she hadn't said that, Camilla groaned. Slowly, she started to melt into the walls of her room. Her bed became her mouth, her nose a dresser, and 2 paintings were her eyes. The therapist screamed and ran out of the house. What are we going to do? Cried Mrs. Cream. It just keeps getting worse and worse. She began to sob. Wow. At that moment, Mr. Cream heard a quiet little knock at the front door. He opened it, and there stood an old woman who was just as plump and sweet as a strawberry. Excuse me, she said brightly. I think I can help. Oh boy, let's see what she's got. She went into Camilla's room and looked around. My goodness, she said with a shake of her head. What we have here is a bad case of stripes, one of the worst I've ever seen. She pulled a container of small green beans from her bag. Here, she said, these might do the trick. Are those magic beans? Said Mrs. Cream. Oh my, no, replied the kind old woman. There's no such thing. These are just plain old lima beans. I'll bet you'd like some, wouldn't you? She asked Camilla. Camilla wanted a big heaping plate full of lima beans more than just about anything, but she was still afraid to admit it. Yuck, she said. No one likes lima beans, especially me. Oh dear, the old woman said sadly. I guess I was wrong about you. She put the beans back in her bag and started toward the door. Camilla watched the old woman walk away. Those beans would taste so good, and being laughed at for eating them was nothing compared to what she'd been going through. She finally couldn't stand it. Wait, she cried. The truth is, I really love lima beans. I thought so, the old woman said with a smile. She took a handful of beans and popped them into Camilla's mouth. Mmm, said Camilla. Suddenly, the branches, feathers, and squiggly tails began to disappear. Then the whole room swirled around. When it stopped, there stood Camilla, and everything was back to normal. I'm cured, she shouted. Yes, said the old woman. I knew the real you was in there somewhere. She patted Camilla on the head. Then she went outside and vanished into the crowd. Afterward, Camilla wasn't quite the same. Some of the kids at school said she was weird, but she didn't care a bit. She ate all the lima beans she wanted, and she never had even a touch of stripes again. The end. Woo, wasn't that a wild story? A bad case of stripes. Can you imagine? What is the moral of this story? The moral of this story is, especially at the beginning of this year and when you meet new people, just be yourself. You don't have to be like anybody else. You don't have to try to act like anyone else. Just be you. Because trying to be someone else can turn out to be a whole bowl of trouble. Okay? And you are great, wonderful, amazing at being you, and horrible at trying to be somebody else. Okay? So, parents, teacher friends, beginning of the school year, this is a good story to start out with. To teach your young ones and your students, guess what? It's okay for you to just be you. Don't try to be anybody else. Whew, that was a wild one, wasn't it? Now, let's put on the glasses. Let us cut our ambiance and get back to the story of Belly Up and Mr. Henry the Hippo. Okay? So, oh, I can't believe it. We're almost halfway through. Look at that. We're almost halfway through. So far, my friends, we got through Teddy and Summer going into the Hippo River. Summer found a little something, a jack that was shaved down to sharp points that could have been something that was fed to poor Henry the hippo. But unfortunately, Summer got caught by her shadows, her bodyguards, who were not too happy with her for giving them the slip. They were upset with Teddy because they thought that she was hanging around with him, which she was. But she said, no, 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 no. I just saw him here at the store. No, no, we weren't hanging out. But they said, listen, we got our eyes on you, okay? Now, Teddy is like, when am I ever going to get to speak to Summer again? I'm on my own with trying to find out what happened to Henry. But maybe not. Maybe if I take this to Doc, he'll listen because he already thought that something that was not right happened to Henry the hippo. This is where we are right now. Let us get back to the story. Okay. The building was immaculate. It was supposed to be as clean as possible for the health of the animals, of course, but except for the quarantine area. It had barely been used. Fun Jungle hadn't been open long enough for many animals to need surgery yet. I headed down a perfectly white and spotless hallway. Doc's office wasn't far along, but the door was open, so I could see that he wasn't there. I hurried on toward the operating rooms, passing the offices on the way. Most of these were empty as well. There were ultimate there were ult- oh, there were ultimately supposed to be, that didn't look right, but it is, a dozen vets on staff at Fun Jungle, but they weren't all hired yet. And those who were on staff spent most of their day out in the park, tending to sick animals on site. Few of these calls were emergencies. Mostly, they were only preemptive checkups. If a keeper noticed anything unusual with one of their animals, a limp, listlessness, loss of appetite, they'd call the hospital, and a junior vet would be dispatched to see what was wrong. Only Doc had the clout to do what few operations there were. There were 4 operating rooms. 2 were the size of a normal human operating room for smaller animals, while 2 were much larger, big enough to perform surgery on a camel. It wasn't a mistake that they weren't quite big enough for a hippo. The bigger an animal was, the more dangerous it was to move from place to place. So it was ultimately safer to do any surgery on it within its enclosure. The first 3 operating rooms were open. No one was inside. They were so clean, it appeared that no one had been in them in weeks, if ever. However, the door of the 4th, one of the larger operating rooms, was shut. I pressed my ear against it and heard voices inside. The thick steel door muffled them, but I could recognize one as Doc's. I knocked. Doc opened the door a crack and peered out, looking flustered, but that changed to annoyance when he saw me. "How the heck did you get back here?" he asked, sounding more irritated than usual. "I need to show you something," I said. "I'm busy," he snapped. He started to close the door, but before he could, I held up the modified jack. "I found this in Henry's pool." Doc stopped the door an inch from shutting it, surprised. For a moment, he wasn't quite sure what to do. 100 different questions seemed to be tumbling around in his head. Finally, he turned to whoever was in the operating room and said, "I need a moment," then stepped into the hall with me and shut the door behind him. "What were you doing in Henry's pool?" he demanded. He kept his voice low, so whoever was in the operating room wouldn't hear. I tried to choose my words carefully. I heard you were looking for this." Doc swiped the jack from my hand and looked it over cautiously. There was a cold silence. I tried to fill it. It was one of the murder weapons. I know it is, Doc hissed. The question is, how did you know? You shouldn't have been looking for this. Something told me it wouldn't be too smart to mention Summer's involvement or to answer Doc's question directly. I thought you'd want to see it, I said. You're not supposed to be back here, Doc replied. So scoot. But I thought now. He shoved the jack into his pocket and turned back to the operating room. I knew saying anything else was a bad idea, but I couldn't help myself. I couldn't let Doc take my evidence and leave me with nothing. But this proves Henry was murdered. Don't you think we should do something? Doc turned back on me, his eyes narrowing. You shouldn't be involved in this at all, he growled. Next time you consider doing something stupid like going into the hippo pool, run it past your parents first. Now get out of here before I call security. With that, he stormed back into the operating room and slammed the door behind him. Right before the door closed, I caught a glimpse of what he'd been doing. A dead jaguar lay on an operating table, sliced open in mid-autopsy. I stood in the hallway, stunned. A dead jaguar was upsetting, but the conversation with Doc had really thrown me. So much about it was disturbing. I wasn't really sure where to start. I'd known Doc could be crusty, but I'd figured showing him the jack would have produced a far different reaction. I'd hoped Doc would have been impressed by my detective work, or thrilled to see proof that his theory was right. Instead, he seemed angry. Well, not just angry. I realized there had been something else wrong with Doc. He seemed worried as well. Who was in that operating room with him, I wondered. I pressed my ear to the door, but the voices had faded, as though Doc and whoever else was in there had stepped away from the front door. I listened to no avail for 30 seconds. Then I decided I'd tested Doc's patience enough and left, my mind full of questions. What was I supposed to do now? If Doc wasn't interested in the jack, why had he taken it? Why was he worried? Was it because of the mystery person in the room, or was it because another animal was dead? I stopped outside the hospital, struck by another disturbing thought. Something had been bothering me about the jaguar since I'd seen it, and now I finally figured out what it was. There weren't any jaguars at Fun Jungle. Chapter 8, Black Mamba. There were supposed to be jaguars at Fun Jungle. They should have been on display as of opening day, but their display area, Carnivore Canyon, wasn't finished. It had fallen several months behind schedule during construction. This was because Fun Jungle's designers had mistakenly chosen to carve the canyon into the ground rather than build a fake canyon altogether, only to discover that the area they picked to carve was solid rock. To get through it, they had to use dynamite, but this couldn't be done as quickly as they'd hoped because the explosions spooked the animals and could damage nearby exhibits. The first time the demolition crew had blasted, the tremor had cracked a $10,000 glass wall at Shark Encounter, threatening to release 10 million gallons of water and 6 very hungry sharks on guests. Shark Encounter had been quickly closed for visitor enhancement, and the demo crew had promised to be more careful from then on. There had been talk of delaying Fun Jungle's opening until Carnivore Canyon was done because Carnivore Canyon had lions and tigers in it, and zoo visitors always disappointed if there aren't lions or tigers. In truth, those animals are usually boring. Lions spend 24 hours a day sleeping, and tigers are masters of hiding in the landscape. But people still love them. Even so, J.J. McCracken had refused to put off the big day. Instead, he found a way to turn the construction delay into a moneymaker. JJ had decided to make an event out of Carnivore Canyon's unveiling, turning it into a second grand opening for Fun Jungle. First, he had the new exhibit heavily advertised, making it sound so amazing that people who'd already come to the park were excited to come back. Then he organized a huge gala sneak peek at the exhibit the night before it opened for special members. Special members were primarily people who'd paid a lot of money for the privilege. But a few invitations were being randomly awarded to park guests, which kept people coming. The party was 2 nights away, and it was going to be huge with catered food and live music and fireworks. There were even rumors that a few movie stars and professional athletes might be there. I had hoped to go, as Carnivore Canyon had been off limits to everyone during its construction, and I was dying to see it. But Mom, who was invited, had sadly informed me that the event was for adults only. Until the canyon opened, no cats were on view at Fun Jungle. The tigers and lions had been in quarantine for weeks, as had the raccoons, otters, and other carnivores that would be on display. Since lions and tigers don't move much, the trick to a good carnivore exhibit is to feature many smaller, more active carnivores. Raccoons and otters might not have much marquee value, but they're fun to watch. The delays had created all sorts of screw-ups for the delivery of many animals. Mom said the jaguars hadn't even arrived yet. So how had a dead jaguar ended up in Doc's operating room? I pondered this as I wandered through Fun Jungle. I wasn't sure where I was going or what I should be doing next. I thought about heading to Monkey Mountain to tell Mom all that had happened, and that I'd met Summer McCracken, and that we'd found the murder weapon together. But then she'd want to know how we found the murder weapon. I didn't want to tell her that not only had I decided to investigate Henry's death against her orders, but that I'd also broken into Hippo River to do it. She'd be livid. Or maybe she wouldn't believe me at all. I didn't even have the murder weapon anymore. She certainly wouldn't buy that Doc had stolen it from me. Even though Doc was a crabby old jerk, Mom still respected him. My cell phone buzzed in my pocket. I fished it out, thinking it was probably Mom, but found a text message instead. It stopped me in my tracks. Meet me at World of Reptiles, Black Mamba exhibit, 7 p.m. Summer. I was surprised that Summer knew my cell number, but only for a moment. Her father was rich and employed both my parents. It had only taken Summer a few minutes to learn about every prank I'd pulled at Fun Jungle. Getting my phone number would have been easy for her. I was even more surprised by how excited I felt. Suddenly, my heart was beating quickly and my skin tingled. I felt like I'd ridden the motion simulator for the first time. I wanted to believe this was because Summer had found a new lead in the case to share with me. But when I thought about it, I realized there was something more. I couldn't wait to see her again. I texted back that I'd meet Summer at the Black Mamba exhibit, then found myself watching my phone, waiting for a reply. After 5 minutes, I realized this was stupid. Why would she need to text me when she was going to see me soon? I checked my watch. It was only 5 o'clock. Time instantly slowed to a crawl. 7 seemed an eon away. Seconds ticked by slowly as I bided my time, trying to find things to occupy my attention. I tried to focus on the case instead, but to no avail. I went on I went on Life of a Bee twice, but found even that couldn't distract me. Eventually, 2 hours had passed. 7 was when Fun Jungle closed for the night, although some exhibits shut down even earlier for the sake of the animals. All the guests weren't gone at 7, though. The stores by the front gates had resumed staying open after closing time in order to continue extracting cash from the guests. But there was nothing left to see, and the guests, oh, sorry, I hit my knee on that, my ankle. Um, where was I? But there was nothing left to see, and the guests were generally trickling toward the exit. World of Reptiles would be empty, which I figured was exactly why Summer wanted to wait until 7 to meet me there. World of Reptiles was probably the most conventional zoo building at Fun Jungle, since there was little way to make reptiles exciting. True, they can do some amazing things, but since they're cold blooded, they often spend hours, if not days, resting, usually under a rock. Still, Fun Jungle's designers had done what they could to make the experience fun, which meant, for the most part, trying to distract the guests with things that weren't reptiles. The building itself was very cool, designed around a huge central glass dome, so it looked like so it looked kind of like a giant turtle. After the dome was an enormous tropical rainforest filled with waterfalls, streams, and towering trees, which were fake but looked real enough, that had an airborne path of rope bridges strung between them. It was like a giant arboreal jungle gym. There were lots of reptiles on display in the atrium, but the designers had included plenty of non reptiles as well to provide some activity for guests to observe: parrots, scarlet ibises, small clawed otters, and 2 families of capuchin monkeys. An even more blatant distraction was the dinosaurs. They weren't real, obviously. They were robots, and I had never been impressed with them. In the first place, they shouldn't have been in a reptile house, seeing as dinosaurs weren't reptiles. Science has proven 100 times over that they were warm-blooded ancestors of birds. Second, they didn't do much except act like they were eating and growl on occasion. Although there was a velociraptor that sprang out of the bushes and occasionally scared little girls. The tourists loved them, though. World of Reptiles designers had shrewdly placed them right before the exit, which kept guests moving through the rest of the building in order to see them. To prevent pedestrian traffic jams, the designers didn't even let people walk through the dinosaurs. Instead, they'd installed moving sidewalks to hustle guests through them quickly. The rest of the building had more traditional displays, generally reptiles in glass cases, although I'd noticed most people intended to ignore them in their haste to get to the rainforest or the dinosaurs. This was a shame, as Fun Jungle's reptile collection was very impressive. There were Galapagos tortoises, a 40-foot anaconda, rare alligator relatives like caimans and gavials, snapping turtles, frilled dragons, basilisks, water monitors, and even a Komodo dragon, the world's biggest lizard. Most remarkable of all, however, was the extensive collection of poisonous snakes. Fun Jungle had more poisonous snakes than any other zoo in the world: cobras, death adders, kraits, asps, coral snakes, cottonmouths, gaboon vipers, fer-de-lances, copperheads, taipans, bandies, bushmasters, sidewinders, 2 dozen kinds of rattlesnakes, and a huge aquarium filled with sea snakes, which were fascinating to watch. The final snake on display was one of the most deadly of all, the black mamba. Mambas aren't the most poisonous snakes, sea snakes are, or even the most poisonous on land. That's the taipan. But they're aggressive. Most poisonous snakes prefer to hide from humans, biting only as a last defense. If a mamba feels threatened, it'll come after you, and they're fast. Thus, they've killed more people than any other kind of snake. It wasn't until I got to the mamba exhibit that I realized it was a strange meeting place for Summer to select. First of all, it was inside World of Reptiles, which was supposed to be locked at night. Luckily, the front door had been propped open with a brick, which I assumed meant Summer would be waiting for me. But when I got to the Mamba exhibit, I found myself alone. Okay, let's end it there, my friends. So, Doc says that he knows that the jack is what killed Henry. How does he know that? Also, there are no jaguars on display at Fun Jungle. Why is he doing an autopsy on a dead jaguar? Who else was in that operating room with Doc? Why was he so worried? There are a lot of questions, my friends. A lot of questions. Why did Summer decide to meet him at the Black Mamba exhibit, one of the most aggressive and dangerous snakes in the wild? We will have to wait until a marvelous Monday to find out what him and Summer are going to talk about. And maybe if we can find out why Doc was so worried, and find out about the jaguar, and find out about how he knew that the jack was what made Henry go belly up. This story again is getting good. Actually, it's not getting good. It got good and then it just kept getting better. It just kept getting better, y'all. Well, that is the end of Miss Hope's reading hour. Once again, I felt myself getting sucked into the book. So I had to say, no, calm down. Don't get sucked in because you're going to go over time. Okay? So thank you so much for being here on Miss Hope's reading hour and reading the first book with me, Chester's Way, to remind you that guess what? It's fine to invite new friends into your friend group and not to do the same things all the time. And a bad case of stripes, which in the moral of this story, it's basically clear. Be yourself, because trying to be somebody else or trying to say that you don't like things can end up in a world of trouble, just like our friend Camilla got into. So have a wonderful weekend. Have a great Saturday and a great Sunday. And I will meet you back here on a marvelous Monday, right here at 3 o'clock on Miss Hope's Reading Hour. Oh, I'm so sorry. I don't know what just happened. Until a marvelous Monday. I so apologize. My screen just went completely blank and it disappeared. I don't know what happened. Well, until a marvelous Monday at 3 o'clock, I will see you next time on Miss Hope's Reading Hour. Until then, have a great weekend, okay? Bye for now. Whew, that was a close one. I thought I lost you guys. Bye.